Okay, cool. Well, this will be Crusade's very own Kel'Thuzad guide, or visual guide. We've already practiced phase 1 a little bit, but this guide will maybe supplement for those who need it to get some info on other abilities and how to counter them. So first off, let's just jump right into phase 1, which we are familiar with, and we're starting here within this green zone, or teal, and the boss can't interact with him on the skull, and mobs will come from the 6 portals. Let's just yeah, we don't need to name them really. People will see them anyway when they come. And this, of course, we are familiar with, which mobs to focus on, and we can assign classes to focus on specific mobs to focus fire a bit. But what we haven't practiced too much yet is phase 2 and 3, which we will cover here in this guide. So first of all, let's cover the positioning, which is pretty essential on this encounter. For simplicity, let's just, is there any arrows here, or let's just make an arrow right here. North. So, and this we'll use to kind of orientate ourselves that where the boss is facing. Oh, this will be north in game 2, by the way, but this is north. And so what we can do from the get-go, because we want to split classes so they can cover the entire room here with polymorphs and fears and heals and auras, stuns, what have you, because this boss encounter will put the entire red group to the test of basically every mechanic that we've faced before. CCing allies that are mind controlled, stunning, heavy spam healing, raid healing, kicking, counterspelling, you name it. So what we can do, usually we have 4 mages and a number of warlocks, 5, 6. What we can do is we can split the room into 4 quadrants or quadrants. So let's do so just like this, for example. We have a blue zone. We have a red zone. You can stand out here and stuff, it's fine. There's no reason why we're excluding it, it's just that then you might not be in range of the boss. We will have a green zone, or quadrant, and a yellow one. And what they can do here, the respective class leaders can, in advance, assign players to different zones. For example, maybe Supreme will sort out, okay, you guys cover the blue zone, you guys cover the red and the green, and Bears will assign the mages, okay, Malanta, you go blue, Bears go red, Nem goes green, and Katanga goes yellow, for example. So that we have 1 to polymorph in each zone. Because within these zones and for the entire raid, we need to, let's make some written notes on the side here. We'll make this in red. Oh, damn it. 10 yards apart. So basically, Cthulhu formation. So we have an Eye of Cthulhu. We in a circle around the boss, 10 yards apart from everybody else. That's the ideal position for any healer or caster or ranged at all, basically. So 10 yards, and according to which zone you're positioned in, and why we want to have polymorph and so on in each zone, we'll get to later. But that's the first thing. As soon as we start to transition from phase 1 to 2, when the boss becomes active, all the ranged DPS and healers will start moving to their respective and assigned zones, while maintaining 10 yards apart when they get there. Because very soon after the boss becomes active, he will start use his arsenal of spells, which are really nasty. And we'll get to them soon. For the melee, we'll just actually cover that right away in a separate square over here, just to display it. If we have the boss in the middle, like so, and we have the tank in front, of course, the melee will be you can either do it in a triangle formation, like so, or a diamond, but that's a bit more delicate with range, because in a diamond formation you can make more groups, but it's more difficult to actually maintain 10 yards apart. So in these 3 groups, let's say we go to diamond, it works, just it's a little bit of fine-tuning. But in this diamond formation, and the reason we're using it is the boss casts a frostbolt on his main target or the tank, and this hits for roughly 12,000 damage that cannot be resisted. I think it has a 1.5 second or 2 second casting time, so there is you need to be quick on the trigger to kick, pummel, shield bash, or even counterspell if you're a mage in one of these zones to interrupt that spell. Every single frostbolt must be interrupted, or else it's a wipe. It's designed to one-shot. It can't be resisted or anything. It just must be resisted. And so we're going to have the melee say in this one over here, let's call this cross group. There will be maybe a warrior and a rogue. Depends how many melee we have. And in diamond group, there will be a warrior and a rogue. And in star, there will be a warrior and a rogue. But we have at least 2 interrupts or kicks, whatever, in each group, and they will rotate. So cross goes next. Okay, then cross kicks, and then okay, diamond, you're next, and so on. So, but also the reason we have the melee separated and everyone else 10 yards apart. Let's make a written. Frost Blast, I think it's called. I'll just put it here. Frost Blast will, well, basically, it will hit a random target. And this target and any other players within 10 yards of the target, hence the 10 yards apart, will be trapped in a frost tomb, similar to the one you've seen on Saffron. Only this frost tomb will take damage of you every second. It's basically a killed ability. You can't survive it without heals, because it will do 120% of your total health over, I think it's 5 seconds. So basically, the more health you have, the more healing you will need, because it will take a percentage of your health and not a fixed number, not a fixed damage number. So say if a rogue gets hit over in the cross, then any other melees in this group will also be frost-tombed. That's why we separate the melee, so that they will not all be frozen at the same time, because if they're all frozen, then maybe we don't have a kick available. And of course, there will be a lot more healing needed. So by separating the melee into different groups, we will minimize how many people we have to heal on Frost Blast, and we'll also maximize the number of kicks and interrupts we have available, even though Frostblast is active. So that's this is the main reason we want the 10 yards apart and the delicate position in place. And this is also the most healing intensive ability, because heroes really need to be on the ball here. And say if an off tank gets hit on the cross, he's got 10,000 health, and that's 2,000 damage every second. Or no, it's 3 even closer. And then you have 2 other rogues maybe with him, and they will take 1,000 damage each. So there's heavy healing needed on these players every time this. And I know that there are probably certain add-ons maybe out there that you can use that will maybe display for you who is trapped in a Frostblast or whatever. And I guess Supreme 2 will have to, in each zone, there will be a healer that is, or a 2 that is designated to heal these specific players. But those details you'll have to ask Supreme about. At least this is how it works. And this is kind of probably the most dangerous ability. But we have more. This one has a lot of abilities. We have, I guess the normal Frostbolt we already covered, because that's the one-shot mechanic. Frostbolt Volley. This is one of the only abilities that is actually on a fixed timer, because Frostblast can happen whenever, basically. It can go 2 minutes before you see one, or it can happen 5 times in 2 minutes. We don't know. There's no fixed timer on abilities here. But Frostbolt has a fixed timer. I think it is every 12 or every 15 seconds. It can't be interrupted. It's instant cast. It will hit everyone in the raid. Either, and you can't kind of sight it, but you can resist it, which is very beneficial because resistance, at least in my experience, resistance scales very well against this ability. So if you have high resistance, you will resist a lot, or if not all. You can fully resist this ability, and it will hit for roughly 2.5 to 3.5 thousand damage on every player. And this is, well, on most casters and healers and maybe in melee, that's 60-70% of their health. So this is quite significant, and also a reason why I want the entire group to be properly topped up at all times, or else this Frostbolt Volley will kill them. Unless, of course, they have potions or resistance to mitigate this. Personally, I'm going to use frost resistance gear, but not as much as on Saffron. I'll go for 100 unbuffed, so half then, roughly. And I do recommend most people do the same, on the practice pulse at least, and we'll take it from there. Because this is a long fight, it will take us maybe 8 minutes, 9. And 9 minutes with Frostbolt Volley every 15 seconds, that's many Frostbolts. So, yeah, you do the math. And then, but yeah, this is, well, simple but heavy, this ability. Another simple, I think it's called Shadow Fissure. Let's make it purple because it's shadow damage. But actually what element it is doesn't matter because it kills you anyway if it hits you. But Shadow Fissure is, the graphic is kind of, looks like some runes or markings on the floor. They spin around. They're red, yellow-ish. No, I mean red, purple. And they will spawn at the feet of a random player. And when you see it happen, you basically, after 3 seconds, it will explode, and the player inside will die. Can't bubble it, nothing can resist it, you're dead. So you need to watch your feet at all times. And if a Shadow Fissure spawns beneath you, then simply take a few steps to your left or your right. Doesn't matter, as long as you get out of it before it ignites, basically. After it has exploded, you can safely go back to your spot. That's fine. But it can, of course, if you have a big melee stack, which is also a benefit of having multiple melee groups, because then there are not too many feet at the same spot. Easier to see graphics on the floor. Because if this hits melee and you have like 5 melees in each group, it may be harder to see this this spell. So just watch your feet. And now, actually, a very tough ability. The mind control. I think it's called Chains of Kel'Thuzad or something. But mind control, this is a dangerous ability. He will, I think this crossbolt volley and mind control is the only things that happen on a fixed timer. Because this happens every minute, I believe. He'll mind control the main tank or the current threat holder and 4 other random players. And while mind control, they will do triple, if not quadruple, damage. And they can, of course, use other spells like Fear or whatever. But this is also the reason why we have Sheeps and Fears separated in each zone, so that we can always cover the entire raid with required CC. Because these players must, of course, be CC'd very, very quickly. Because say if Korik gets mind controlled, he has 400% damage increase and he goes to attack Supreme. I mean, it gets ugly pretty quick. Or anyone else for that matter. But yeah, quick, very, very quick mind controls, stuns, what have you, on the affected players. And they must be mind controlled for the duration of the spell. Can't be dispelled. And every time he does this, he will completely wipe the aggro table. Which is why we will have 2 more tanks separated in these groups, because say if we have 2 off tanks or just 1 and he's in cross group, but cross group is now frozen in a frostbolt, he can't take over aggro. You have a wipe, or at least you have a bad situation. So the tanks, we will have 2 tanks, will be Small Cow and I, will be in 2 separate melee groups here to take the boss and take over this shield position. And so, say if Sipsoa gets mind controlled, I take over, I come from star. Then Sips, when he's done, when he's no longer mind controlled, he will take my spot in the star group, basically. And then when I get mind controlled, maybe Smolka will take over, and so on. I will take her position in this group, and so on, so on. So, since this ability happens on a fixed timer, a few seconds before it hits, everyone needs to stop damage. We want to try and make the ignite fade, for example. Don't reapply dots. Just stop auto-attacking for a couple seconds so that the first few, or the aggro that he gets on this very essential 2-second window when he casts mind control or when it wipes the aggro. Let's make sure that this is a tank that catches him then and gets him smoothly back in position, and we can continue. So, because this will happen repeatedly every minute for the duration of the encounter. Yeah, we have 1 more spell. And this one is actually very, very dangerous. I think it's called Detonate Mana. Yeah. And actually this one, I can't remember if it does nature or arcane damage. But basically anyway, on this fight, like if you want to try hard, you want to pre-pot a potion of every element. Like, well, of course frost, because the boss does frost. But shadow, because, well, he mind controls a warlock and he casts Shadow Bolt on you. It does triple damage, that's 10,000 damage. It would be nice to have a Shadow Pot here. And vice versa with mages or whatever. But of course it depends on how fast you can mind control them, or I mean CC them. But Detonate Mana, I think it does nature. But to be safe, I mean, they're quite cheap now, both Arcane and Nature. Let's pre-pot both, and you will find out. You will see which potion gets expired first. And then you just reapply accordingly if you need. But Detonate Mana also applies to 10 yards positioning, because this will hit a random target. You get a debuff. It, over the course of 5-6 seconds, it will burn through half your mana, half of your total mana, or half of your current mana, I mean. And upon detonation, it will deal, I think it's 1 damage per mana burned. So if you have very high mana, say if you get 6,000 mana burned because you had 12, well, that's very unnatural high. Say if you have 10,000 mana maximum because of a flask and bust or whatever, and then he burns 5,000 mana, that's 5,000 health to you and anyone in 10 yards. Hence the 10 yards wide circle positioning. Because that mana will kill if the 10 yards is compromised or if people are stacking too tight. And of course, it's very dangerous for example, Retribution Paladins like Elkavisk, for example. If he gets hit by Detonate Mana, you will have to bubble instantly or run out of your current group. So that when it detonates after 5 seconds, you will only damage yourself and not 6 others. So yeah, this is a dangerous ability for Protection Paladins, Sweaty Paladins, and Enhancement Shamans, basically. So these abilities, plus of course the one-shot Frostbolt on the tank, will happen repeatedly, again and again and again, for the duration of the fight, and we need to counter all of them. By having 10 yards apart from each other, we have these CCs to cover the entire floor. We check our feet to get out of mind control, and we keep the raid topped up, and we use our frost potions and resistance to mitigate the frostbolt volley. Now, maybe this looks quite simple, and kind of it is, but when the boss reaches 40%, we enter phase 3, which is where it gets really fun. All these spells will just continue as usual, but now the boss will spawn 5 adds. These are called Guardians of Icecrown, and they will spawn from either of these 6 portals around the room. They look like a Nubricon, basically. And they are undead, so they can be shackled by priests. And actually they must be shackled, because if you don't shackle this is almost impossible, this phase. Or for a group like us, normal group, it is impossible without shackle. But here goes. 5 Guardians. And you can shackle up to a maximum of 3. Because if you try and shackle a 4th one, then Kel'Thuzad will break all shackles and release them all. So we shackle a maximum of 3, and the 2 others will need to be tanked by tanks that are at the ready. We can use our ferals for this, because you don't really want to have, or you can of course, but since we have warriors we can use it, because if a feral is main tanking, he gets mind controlled. Now first of all, he can't be polymorphed, of course, and second, he's a party buff. The 2% crit one will affect Kel'Thuzad, and he hits hard already, and don't want to give him more crit. And the druid can will basically, you don't really want mind control druids, because there is a limited, we can't do too much CC to them. So the druids can be ready to pick up the 2 remaining Guardians of Icecrown. They hit pretty hard, but nothing you can't handle. But here's the trick. I think it's called Blood Tap. Let's put it down here. Increased damage. Blood Tap, which is a buff that these Guardians of Icecrown can give themselves. And it will give them 15% increased damage. And this stacks up to 100. So, and they can buff themselves on there are two things that can make them buff themselves with this. That is, if they ever change target, they will buff themselves with 1 stack. If anyone in the group dies, they will all buff themselves every time. So say if Alavara goes over here, he pulls one over here. Oh, sorry. Pulls one over here. And say if someone attacks it or whatever, and pulls aggro, okay, he gains a stack. And he goes over to this player that over aggroed him. He kills him, gets another stack. And now because the player is dead, he targets another one, the tank again, changes target, stacks again. So now in 3 seconds he got 3 stacks because someone pumped him too soon. And say at the same time, say if 2 players were low on health, they got 2 people died, 2 frostbolt volley. Now they all gain 2 stacks of this damage buff. So of course, if no one dies and if the tanks can do this comfortably, they're not too dangerous. But as soon as this blood tap starts buffing, it snowballs really quick into disaster. And personally, I wiped so many times on these guardians. I never killed this boss. So of course, take my guide with a pinch of salt because I have no real experience of it. But yeah. So phase 3 from bosses 40%. Every ability will continue like usual, and you have to shackle and keep shackled 3 guardians, and you have to tank 2 of them. Oh, and by the way, of course, in phase 2, when we start a boss fight, the boss will be here, of course, in the middle. And this triangle formation or this diamond formation will just be like so around the boss. So this is how the fight will look like. And they'll have healers over here and here and here. And you'll have casters spread around to fair and whatever. So yeah, this is how we're going to do it, or this is how it will look like. So what we're going to do is, of course, when phase 2 gets over, we quickly move out in a formation 10 yards apart. The melee will go into their diamond formation in the middle, with preferably 2 interrupters in each group. And we must, kick the frostbolt. Frost blast must be intensively healed. Frostbolt volley, keep the raid topped up. Shadow fissure, watch your feet. You're dead if you don't. Mind control, CC, the player is affected. Watch your aggro so that another tank can take over. And detonate mana, keep 10 yards apart. And if you're in melee range, or if you are in range of someone and you get it, move out of range quickly so that when you detonate, it doesn't damage anyone. Because the debuff will hit you, and it will tick for 5 seconds, and the damage will be dealt on 0, or when it ticks out, if I'm not wrong. I'm 90% sure this is how it works. You'll get the debuff, it'll burn mana for a duration, 4 or 5 seconds, and when it reaches 0, the damage will be dealt. So you have like a short window to actually move out of if you are close to other players. Yeah. If you hear Pursue, you can stop it.